everybody, and welcome to TEK's podcast series. And TEK, as you all know, of course, is the professional community of academic engineers and architects in Finland. My name is Roman Schatzin. I've come from a country that doesn't exist anymore. It used to be called West Germany, and I've been living and working in Finland for more than 35 years. I'll be hosting this podcast series, and together with my guests, we'll investigate what it's like for a foreigner to work in Finland, what it's like for a Finnish employer to hire immigrant workforce, and what it's like for Finns and immigrants to work together. And today my guests are Patricia Virsinger and Shannon Nichols. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
The two of you have done a survey, some sort of research, and you published it last year, 2021, and it was called Always Standing on the Fragile Side of Ice, Immigrants' Integration into the Labor Market in Finland. Let's talk about that. First question, why did you do that research? Why was it needed?
Yeah, well,
do we have a problem?
Yeah, I think anyone who's paying attention to the news or is an immigrant, like all of us, would know that Finland has a bit of a problem with immigrants finding employment here. There's always articles in Yle about it and all of the other big newspapers. So I think it is a big problem that gets some recognition, and increasingly also from the government and MPs and such. So that was the motivation for the research, was kind of seeing that this is a problem, people are talking about it, but people aren't having an easy time finding any solutions. People are kind of proposing different things, but what really is the problem, first of all? Why aren't they finding jobs? And what kind of solutions can we propose from a myriad of different stakeholders? It can't be a one-stop shop for solutions. It's not any one group's job to fix the problem. So that's kind of what we were thinking of when we went into it.
What were your major findings? What's the one simple answer to the question, why can't immigrants find a job in Finland?
There's no one simple answer, unfortunately. But I think maybe what we found is maybe one of the main reasons is the attitudes of the companies.
Yeah, discrimination and prejudice is kind of this one big topic that underscores all of the problems that immigrants are having in the labor market. It's not, the only thing for sure, but it is the main thing that
So it's not
runs
bureaucracy,
through it.
or it's not the educational background of those immigrants. It's really racial or social or religious or maybe sexual prejudice. Or
Well, those are also very important reasons that you mentioned, but as Shannon said, this prejudice and discrimination is one that underscores all of them. So,
And I think you'll find that also the bureaucracy or the educational background or the perception of the educational background of immigrants, discrimination plays a role in that as well. The bureaucracy and the laws of Finland are not untouched by the cultural attitudes of Finnish people. So discrimination definitely plays a big role in shaping how that legislation plays out, and even from the letter of the law, how it's implemented.
But that problem you investigated has another side that's just as bad, because we also have constant news on Finnish media about employers desperately looking for qualified workforce, and they can't find them. Because, young Finns get a brilliant education, and the next thing they do is they leave the country and go to California or to Berlin or work someplace where it's interesting and the payment is better. So do I see that right? There are two halves of this globe that would fit nicely if somebody could bring them together.
This idea that there's no qualified workforce is a bit of a not true, because Finland is educating thousands of foreign students every year, but they're not providing them opportunities, so they leave. I studied here my master's in a foreign program. It was in English, so half of us were foreigners, half of us were Finnish people, and almost every person in my program left because there weren't any jobs for us here. I think that's also kind of a problem of the sector that we are from. We work in peace and conflict, so we would work in NGOs and governments, but there's no NGOs that in Finland that operate in English, from what I've seen. So everyone kind of took it on their own and left. I also don't work for a Finnish company, so those sorts of things make it difficult for people. And that's also kind of a lot of our recommendations in the report are how can universities actually make it so that graduates get jobs, learn Finnish, all of these sorts of things.
Yeah,
But
so that's why networking is... sorry for interrupting.
No.
So that's why networking is especially important already during the studies. So universities and student organizations should already work during the studies that Finnish people and international people mingle, form friendships, and then later maybe become colleagues. But another thing that we noticed in our research is that many of the technology students who are Finnish, they do their thesis already employed by a company. So quite often their work contract just continues after graduation. However, when it comes to the international students, they might not have the network to even get a thesis position. And of course, without a thesis written for a Finnish company, it's even more difficult to get inside that world of their own studies.
What did you find out? What's the main argument Finnish employers use when they refuse to hire a foreigner or an immigrant?
I think one of the biggest, there's kind of two big ones, I think, but one of the biggest is definitely Finnish language skills. It's something that is discussed a lot in the literature by people like researchers, but also by immigrants themselves in recounting their experiences of living in Finland. But it's also something that immigrants and a lot of researchers view with a little bit of suspicion because it's the idea of what kind of language skills and how well you need to speak the language is very subjective. People saying that you need near native level or proficient, by what standards? They're not usually using the A1 to C2 levels to determine how well someone is speaking Finnish. And also, there's a lot of research showing that people don't even understand what really a B1 is capable of doing or C1 is capable of doing. So employers don't even really know what level of Finnish they're asking for in the first place. And they usually overestimate the extent to which you need to know Finnish while also downplaying the levels of Finnish that people speak. Research shows that if you just have a foreign accent, Finnish employers perceive your language skills as less than they really are. So while, of course, language skills are important in a lot of jobs, if you're dealing with clients and you need to speak to people who speak Finnish, of course you need to know Finnish. And it's, of course, not practical to expect that a business would change their language policy overnight from a Finnish one to an English one. But it is definitely something that is a bit of an excuse.
A very big change, a dramatic shift in Finland has been 35 years ago when I arrived in this country, nobody spoke English practically. And now everybody speaks English, thanks to Nokia and our brilliant school system. But Patricia, you started out with no language skills, probably, just Hungarian grammar, but no vocabulary. And after 10 years, now you speak Finnish.
Yes, I do.
How did your life change through learning the local language? What happened?
Well,
Your integration.
I must say that it helped tremendously in finding new friends and building up a social network because, as you said, people speak English very well, and even 10 years ago when I arrived, at first I communicated in English. However, sometimes it felt like I get left outside of a conversation, or someone who is or someone new I meet and they are very shy and they are not sure if their English skills are good enough, so they would choose to not talk to me at all. So I thought that if I want to get to know people, because since I arrived here alone, I needed to get friends and build up a social circle. So I thought that it would be the easiest if I tried to get my Finnish as good as possible, as quick as possible. So it helped me in getting friends, and then of course it also helped with some customer service jobs that I had. But I think the most important is getting friends and building up a network. So I felt like the same people with whom I used English when our friendship started opened up much more when we switched to Finnish. We also had talked about it in our research that in a way in many cases the foreign students are, well, how to say, forced to spend time with each other because of the English language, because even if you don't have that much in common, but you just still become friends because they speak English.
Yeah, a lot of studies who had interviewed immigrants to see their experiences of living in Finland and had found that a lack of Finnish language skills and also this kind of perceived closeness of Finnish people and their friend groups really prevented people from being able to hang out with people that weren't immigrants. A lot of people said that even when they tried to meet Finnish people, they kind of would just reproduce national stereotypes they had about them and say like, oh, you know, what do you think of Donald Trump as president? But it wouldn't really get much further than that. And people felt that Finnish people weren't actually really interested in being friends with them when they were immigrants. So they ended up spending their time with other immigrants, even though maybe they didn't want to. Immigrants are not going to get better at speaking Finnish if they're not put in situations where they have to speak Finnish. If the problem is that immigrants are spending mostly time with other immigrants, I don't speak Finnish in my daily life.
I was going to ask you next, how's your Finnish coming along?
So it's, you know, you need to put people in situations where they're pushed to develop their skills, where they're pushed to try harder working on their Finnish. And maybe that means that they don't always work by themselves at their job. They can get help from a Finnish person when they need it, but people need to be kind of stretched and you need to be willing to push that person to develop. People can't get better at speaking Finnish if they're hungry.
Finland has 5.5 million inhabitants, so it's practically impossible to avoid nepotism and bribery because we're all relatives in this country or our children go to the same kindergarten. So, of course, 75% of the jobs going under the table is anti-democratic and not transparent at all, but it's very traditional here. You know, but you've heard about the deals made in saunas.
Yeah.
Yes.
These days, women do it too in their own sauna.
Yeah, I mean, it's, of course, people, when they come to Finland, should integrate to a certain extent, but when the discussions of immigration are filled with talking points of we need immigrants because the Finnish population isn't growing and soon we won't be able to sustain the economic system and welfare system that we've built without immigrants, you can expect people to come here and not also kind of meet halfway. People can't come here and be expected to be Finns. They're not Finns.
Or become Finns.
No. And also, it's hard to say what even is a Finn. You can't define all of that because not all Finnish people are the same. So it's unreasonable to expect that every immigrant that would come here would just become a Finnish person and integrate seamlessly into society without anybody kind of helping them and meeting them in the middle.
That's a very old-fashioned concept of integration.
Yeah.
Turning into them. That's not the idea. What kind of support can an immigrant get in Finland? Isolated, not able to find a job, rejected by the local culture and society. Are there any hotlines or
Yeah, I mean,
groups?
kind of the most basic integration infrastructure that Finland has is the TE office. But there's a lot of problems with TE and the integration services that Finland offers. They're really focused on labor market integration, pretty much only focused on labor market integration. So they push people into employment, even if that's not the kind of employment that they want. A lot of immigrants who, especially refugees who have come from Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries in conflict, report that they come here, they maybe had a flourishing career and they have qualifications, but TE will be like, that's great, but you can't get a job in that here, so you should be a construction worker or a child carer or a practical nurse, and they don't really give the immigrants any option to integrate into Finland in their actual profession.
Do the Finns get that option in the same situation, or is that something that's being done to the immigrants or foreigners?
Well, I think what we found is that it's mostly done towards foreigners, because the foreign qualifications are not viewed by Finland as equal and quality enough. So I think that's one of the reason that those who were, for example, in their home country, successful lawyers or anything like highly educated, and they are pushed to be practical nurses or child care or cleaners. So
We have dentists and doctors driving taxis.
Yes.
Not
exactly.
only in
So-
Finland, but also in Germany and many other.
Yeah, and it does happen to a certain extent to Finns, but to Finns who study outside of Finland. Some Finns, there's like an Yle article from I think last year, where a man who was a physicist and studied in the UK, if I remember correctly, came back to Finland, and he said he sent like 80 applications, and the only people who replied to him were construction jobs. So it is a problem that happens to Finns because of this prejudice against non-Finnish educational institutions.
Many people come here for all sorts of reasons. Would you say that there is this Finnish attitude that they come here because they need work? So we'll give them some work and then they'll work and everybody will be fine. You know what I mean? Finland is not ready to understand that whoever comes here needs much more than just a job.
I don't think it's that there's an attitude that people come here and they just need a job. I actually think usually the attitudes about immigrants are more that they come here for other reasons that's not working, and that's why they're illegitimate to be here, and giving them a job is kind of a way to keep immigrants busy and from taking away from this amazing welfare system that Finland has built. Finnish people, and I think a lot of the Scandinavian countries who have built these welfare systems that are the envy of the world, or the maybe hatred of the US, they think that people come here to benefit from the welfare system. There's no evidence that supports that people do that. Studies from the EU show that that's not a type of migration. But people think they do, and so they give them jobs in order to keep them from taking away from the welfare system. So I think that that's probably the biggest problem with that.
I think immigrants are basically keeping up the welfare system.
Yes, they
Imagine you go snap and there are no more immigrant workers in Finland. Traffic is going to stop. There won't be any food left. Nobody will clean these buildings anymore. So, yeah.
especially here in the capital area. So
Yeah.
I used to live like 6 years in Oulu, and then I lived for 2 years in Lappeenranta. So compared to that, the capital area is actually the place to be if an immigrant wants to find a job, which is sometimes unfortunate if you have your social networks in another city and then you have to get out of there only in order to get a job. You will get the job, but you will lose everything else.
Are the attitudes towards immigrants that much different regionally from place to place in Finland?
I would say yes, because I think here in the capital area, for example, there's so many multinational companies, for example, that take the highly educated immigrants, and because it's so big, there's also more vocational jobs for immigrants as well.
Did you find any differences between Finnish work morale and foreign work morale? Because I know for a fact that some Finnish employers think, those guys, those foreigners, if I hire them, then they might not show up, or they might they might steal something. Really weird cultural prejudices.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah, it's definitely something we tried to target, just this kind of idea in general of this stereotyping people. I mean, how can you decide that what the American work morale is, or the Hungarian work morale, or the German work morale? I mean, that's, everybody's an individual, and how can you tell that whatever trait they have is based on where they're from? It's impossible, and it's not true. But a lot of employers, unfortunately, on the other side, think that immigrants have a really high work ethic. They're really they're really flexible, except to an excessive extent. They're very they comply with everything, and they would hire immigrants. They prefer to hire immigrants for that reason, because immigrants adopt those attitudes and adopt those positions in response to the precarity that they face, the discrimination that they face. When you know that your job can be taken away from you, and maybe you get deported because you can't keep your visa anymore, or that this was the 50th job you applied to and you finally got a call back, it's difficult for you to say no to what your employer is asking you. But another big finding that we had in our research was that immigrants aren't really aware of their workers' rights in Finland. And employers use that to their advantage to underpay and exploit workers. So if immigrants are seen as being excessively flexible for employers, they're going to use that to their advantage. And even though for Finnish people, for example, like not having a minimum wage and things works because you know what the collective agreement is, you know that you have a collective agreement, immigrants might not know that and might not be able to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, so this is where it's very important for unions just like TEK and all the others to educate international students already during their studies and recruit members to their union already from the students, because that's when they can start to educate them about Finnish working life. So when they graduate and they do manage to get a job, they won't get exploited.
Thank you very much. Köszönöm szépen, vielen Dank. And we'll meet again with the next part of TEK's podcast. Take care, everybody. Ahoy.